What would you do if the people who raised you, the ones who said they believed in you, tried to take everything you built? This is the true story of a man who started a tech company in his garage, turned it into a $15 million success, and then watched his own family attempt to push him out. But instead of fighting back in anger, he made a move no one saw coming, one that would change everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most powerful revenge is choosing peace. Nathan Cole was 33 years old when he sold his first company, Sold, being a word he would later come to regret. At that moment, though, standing in the echoing emptiness of his new office, nothing could eclipse the bittersweet taste of triumph. A tech startup that had begun in a cluttered garage, one that no one believed in but him, had grown into a name that mattered. Not a unicorn, not a disruptor, but it worked. It employed people, it solved problems, it mattered. Minnesota winters were long and cruel, the kind that clawed under your skin and demanded resilience. Nathan had grown up in a 2-story home in a modest suburb outside Minneapolis, the kind of place where lawns were cut short and fathers folded newspapers over black coffee, where love was quiet and sometimes indistinguishable from expectation. Richard Cole. Nathan's father was a man of angles. His back was straight, his hands calloused from decades working in industrial contracting. He spoke in firm tones, believed in hard work, and rarely offered praise, though he expected excellence. Evelyn, Nathan's mother, was gentler. Her warmth came in brief offerings, a hand on the shoulder, a sandwich left on his desk. She rarely raised her voice, but just as rarely raised objections. Her love was steady if silent. Then there was Samantha. Samantha Cole arrived in the world 4 years after Nathan, but it felt like she'd been born shining. Smart, articulate, endlessly charming, she glided through the family like music, and everyone tuned in. Teachers adored her. Classmates followed her. At dinner, while Nathan mumbled about Python scripts and motherboard glitches, Samantha recounted her debate club victories or student council initiatives. Evelyn beamed. Richard nodded with restrained pride. Nathan wasn't unloved, but he was unseen, or more precisely misunderstood. He was the child who took apart the family microwave at age 8, not out of malice, but to understand the dance of electrons. He hoarded secondhand motherboards like treasure, spent nights under the glow of old monitors, typing in languages no one else in the house could read. It wasn't that his family discouraged him. They just didn't speak his language. In a household where ambition meant honor roll scholarships and respectable job titles, Nathan's obsessions with servers, networks, and open-source communities felt alien. The garage became his sanctuary. His father had converted it into a workspace complete with tools, a battered workbench, and the lingering scent of oil and old wood. When winter came, Nathan would wrap himself in layers, position a space heater next to his desk, and lose himself in code. Hours passed in silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic tapping of keys and the occasional hum of debugging frustration. He built his first app at 14, an inventory management tool for his school library. It was clunky and elegant, but functional. No one noticed. At 16, he launched a basic e-commerce plugin that briefly trended in a niche online forum. Richard thought it was a distraction. Evelyn thought it was nice. Samantha. She had a scholarship interview that week and didn't ask. Yet Nathan wasn't bitter. Not then. He didn't resent them. He simply existed parallel to them, orbiting a different sun. What fueled him wasn't validation, it was clarity. In a world where conversations were murky and rules changed depending on tone and timing, the logic of computers was honest. Code didn't lie. Code didn't shift when you weren't looking. It either ran or it didn't. It either broke or it built. Still, he longed quietly for someone to say, "I see you." The memory that stayed with him more than any birthday or school dance was one particular afternoon in the garage. He was 15. Outside, snow fell in heavy sheets. Inside, he sat hunched over a half-assembled server, fingers numb, eyes burning. Richard opened the door without knocking. Nathan froze, expecting a lecture about heating bills or college prep. But his father just looked around the cluttered space, the wires, the glowing screens, the scribbled notes, and said, "Don't burn the house down." Then he left. It was the closest thing to approval Nathan would get for years. By the time Samantha was applying to Ivy League schools, Nathan had quietly built a network of clients for freelance development work. He never advertised. Word of mouth traveled through forums, chat rooms, late-night calls between startup founders. He was good, precise, reliable, invisible. In his early 20s, he moved out not too far, just enough, rented a studio apartment above a laundromat and set up a desk beside the only window. When his first client paid him $5,000 for a custom software build, he wired 1,000 of it to his parents without a note. He didn't tell them what he was doing. Part of him didn't think they'd care. Part of him was still waiting for them to ask. What they did ask eventually was, "Why aren't you using your degree?" Nathan had graduated with honors in computer science, but the paper sat somewhere in a drawer. He wasn't interested in climbing someone else's ladder. He wanted to build his own. He called it Farsight Systems, a nod to his need to always look ahead past the noise into structure and vision. The company started in his garage again, this time rented behind a friend's auto shop. No investors, no co-founders, just Nathan, a second-hand server rack, and an obsession with infrastructure tools that made teams faster and leaner. He didn't chase hype. While others built photo-sharing apps or crypto wallets, Nathan focused on boring problems with elegant solutions. And clients came. By 33, Farsight had grown into a team of 20, serving mid-size firms across 4 countries. Still modest by Silicon Valley standards, but to Nathan it was everything: a place where clarity reigned, where the rules were his, where he finally perhaps belonged. But belonging is fragile, and the people we want most to see us are often the ones who look away longest. Nathan had never been the reckless type. He paid his credit cards in full, answered emails with punctuation, and read terms of service documents more thoroughly than anyone probably ever should. But when he turned 24 and received a job offer from a prestigious software firm, benefits, equity, upward mobility, he surprised everyone, including himself, by walking away from it. "I'm going to start something of my own," he told his mother one Sunday over tea. Evelyn didn't respond right away. She stirred her mug slowly, then looked up. "You've always been independent," she said. It wasn't encouragement, but it wasn't disapproval either. Just a simple observation. Richard was less poetic. You're leaving a 6-figure job offer to do what exactly he'd barked that night. Play CEO in your bathrobe. Nathan didn't argue. There was no point. He knew his father's tone. It was the same one used when Samantha had once brought home a B+. Still, the decision was made. He rented a tiny studio above a bike repair shop downtown. No insulation, no view. Just enough space for a cot, a whiteboard, and 2 monitors on a folding table. It was perfect. The idea had come slowly, like condensation forming drop by drop. Small businesses, he realized, were drowning in inefficient digital tools. Too many subscriptions, too many dashboards, too many broken APIs. Nathan wanted to build a modular platform, simple, clean, adaptable infrastructure that didn't require a team of engineers to run. He wanted to make complexity feel elegant. He called it modulus, though the name would change later. With a laptop and borrowed server space, he coded 16 hours a day, fueled by instant ramen and almond butter. He spoke to small business owners, sat in on boring Zoom calls just to understand their workflow, and mapped out every possible pain point. But building the product was the easy part, getting someone to fund it. That was war. Nathan pitched to 5 different angel investors in 3 months. He tweaked his pitch deck until it gleamed with numbers, projections, market data. He rehearsed in front of mirrors, recorded himself, sought feedback from mentors. Each time he was told some version of the same thing. You're too quiet. You need a co-founder. This doesn't have a viral element. We're not sure you're the guy to scale it. The last one stung most, not because it wasn't true, but because it echoed what he'd feared his whole life. When the last investor ghosted him after promising a follow-up meeting, Nathan sat in the laundromat below his apartment watching a slow spin of towels and admitted it. He couldn't do this alone. Not yet. He had no trust fund, no secret savings. What he had was code and conviction, and neither of those paid AWS fees. So he picked up the phone and called his parents. It was a Tuesday evening when he sat at their kitchen table again. Same house, same table, same rigid chairs. Evelyn served meatloaf. Richard read the newspaper. Nathan laid it out carefully, what the product was, what the plan was, how much he needed. How much? Richard asked again, lowering the paper. $150,000. Nathan repeated. The silence was heavy. Evelyn glanced at Richard, her fork hovering mid-air. Richard didn't flinch. You want us to give you our retirement? He said, not as a question. Nathan clarified, not give. A loan. I'll pay it back with interest. We can set terms. Richard grunted. What bank turned you down? All of them, Nathan admitted. But not because it's a bad idea. No, it's because you have no collateral, no experience running a company, and no co-founder. Investors aren't stupid. Nathan stared at the table. A burn was rising in his throat. I'm not asking you to believe in the product, he said quietly. Just in me. Richard stood up, walked to the fridge, poured himself a glass of water. He didn't speak for almost a minute. Then turning back, he said, You'll get the money. But don't forget who backed you first. It wasn't a blessing. It was a burden disguised as help. There was no contract, no paperwork, just a check and a condition. We want updates, regular ones. Nathan nodded. He didn't have the luxury of pride. He wired the funds into a new business account, updated his equipment, and rented a larger garage workspace near the university campus. It had heat, a decent Wi-Fi connection, and a desk he built himself. There were no employees, no interns, no marketing team. Just him, and now the weight of his parents' future on his shoulders. Every dollar spent echoed in his mind. Every hour not coding felt stolen. He'd wake at 4:30, work until midnight, nap on the floor shower at a gym down the street. He didn't post motivational quotes. He didn't tell friends what he was doing. Most didn't ask. And all the while, Richard's words rang in his ears like a metronome. Don't forget who backed you first. But for all the tension, the work began to pay off. A regional logistics firm signed up for a demo, then a dental software provider, then a construction project management startup. Word spread quietly. They liked the product. They liked the founder's quiet precision. They referred others. Nathan reinvested everything, hired a part-time developer, then a UX designer, created support documentation, moved out of the garage and into a small co-working space with glass walls and free coffee. He still worked 16-hour days, but now the hours built something visible. Still, he didn't tell his family much. Samantha had just been accepted to Wharton, and dinner conversations revolved around her move to the East Coast. Evelyn beamed. Richard gave her stock tips. Nathan stayed quiet. He brought them an early demo once. His father didn't try it. His mother smiled politely and asked if he was eating well. But Nathan no longer needed their approval. What he needed was time and space to prove that he could build something real. Not just for the market, but for himself. Nathan didn't remember the exact moment his parents first mentioned Samantha joining the company. but it came the way most things in his family did, softly, strategically during a dinner conversation cloaked in casual tone. You know, Evelyn had said, setting down a bowl of roasted carrots Samantha's finishing up at Wharton this spring. Top of her class. She's got a mind for business, Richard added, already slicing the roast. Real instinct. You could use someone like that. Nathan glanced up from his plate. He didn't respond immediately. He knew better than to resist too soon. That was how his father worked: suggestions first, then pressure later. She's welcome to visit the office, Nathan said neutrally. She's not visiting, Richard said. We think she should come on board, and just like that, we think became this is happening. Samantha arrived 2 months later. She wore a navy blazer, carried a leather-bound notebook, and glided through the co-working space like she already belonged. Nathan had arranged a team lunch to welcome her. She brought individually wrapped gift bags labeled with each employee's name. Inside were custom pens, motivational quotes, and miniature jars of honey that said, "Let's build sweet things together." Nathan hated how well it landed. His team, young, overworked, loyal, gravitated toward her instantly. She remembered names, quickly laughed generously, and asked the kind of questions that made people feel important. What do you want to build here? What motivates you? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Nathan had never asked those questions. He'd assumed people worked to get paid and stayed when they felt safe. Samantha made them feel seen. At first he told himself it was good. She scheduled one-on-ones, reorganized the file structure, and streamlined the task board. She redesigned the pitch deck, booked a brand consultant, and introduced a more colorful logo. Friendly tech is winning now, she explained. Nathan nodded, said thank you, and quietly reverted the logo in the system files. He told himself it was a phase, that she'd get bored, move on, or grow tired of the messiness of a mid-stage startup. But she didn't. Instead, Samantha doubled down. She began meeting directly with clients, first with Nathan beside her, then without him. He'd learn about meetings after they'd happened. She began looping in legal advisors without informing him. She gave the team Friday afternoons off to encourage reflection. She proposed performance reviews to professionalize the culture. Nathan found himself increasingly out of step. He'd built Modulus, now rebranded to Struct, around simplicity, agile teams, direct conversations, minimal bureaucracy. But now there were layers, titles, PowerPoint decks, a growing divide between the product and the perception of it. One Monday morning, he arrived to find the product roadmap completely reorganized in their system. The new version prioritized front-end delight features over infrastructure improvements. I didn't approve this, Nathan said. Samantha looked up from her coffee. The team voted. It's more marketable this way. We don't vote on architecture. Maybe we should. More. The tension wasn't explosive. It was insidious. Samantha never raised her voice. She never challenged Nathan directly. But she introduced new vocabulary: scaling, narrative, equity planning. She spoke about founder blind spots in meetings without naming names. She praised Nathan publicly while subtly suggesting the company had grown beyond its original vision. He tried to assert boundaries, set new approval workflows, remind the team of core values, but each move painted him as resistant, regressive. Clients liked Samantha's energy. Employees responded to her charisma. She was younger, brighter, MBA certified. Nathan was the founder, but he was starting to feel like a relic. One afternoon, he overheard Samantha on a call. We're aiming to mature past the garage phase mindset, she said smoothly. Nathan's brilliant, of course, but you need executive focus to grow. She didn't know he was standing outside the door. He didn't confront her. Instead, he went home, lay on the floor of his living room, and stared at the ceiling fan until it stopped spinning. He tried talking to Richard. She's overstepping, Nathan said. Undermining process, taking liberties I never approved. She's taking initiative, Richard replied. You should be grateful. Not everyone's lucky enough to have family who care. Nathan stared at his father, stunned by the irony. Do you even know what we're building? I know a good operator when I see one, Richard said, and she's one. It wasn't about the product, it never had been. Evelyn was harder to read. She listened when Nathan spoke, nodded softly. But she never took sides. She folded towels, asked if he'd eaten, and said things like, You and Samantha have different gifts. Nathan wanted to scream. This is not about gifts. It was about trust, about control, about identity. He had built this from nothing. The wires, the code, the clients, all of it came from late nights, missed holidays, and dreams he hadn't dared to share. And now, his sister was turning it into a stage for herself. And everyone applauded. But he couldn't walk away, not yet. Late at night, Nathan would sit in the office long after everyone had gone. The glow of the monitors cast ghostly patterns on the walls. He'd stare at the original product flowchart still pinned above his desk. The lines were messy, the boxes uneven, but it was honest. He remembered the garage, the space heater, the frost on the window. He remembered believing that if he worked hard enough, they'd see him. Not just as a builder, but as a leader, as someone worthy. Instead, they saw potential in her, the golden sister, the born winner. Nathan knew something was shifting. He could feel it under his skin, but he didn't yet know how far they were willing to go. Nathan almost didn't go that night. The invitation came, like most things from his parents, delivered with the subtle pressure of tradition. Family dinner, Evelyn had texted. Sunday, 6:30. He considered declining. He considered faking a meeting, a headache, a weekend trip. But something gnawed at him, a mixture of duty dread and an echo of the boy in the garage still hoping to be seen. He arrived 10 minutes early. The house was exactly the same. Beige siding, trimmed hedges, the faint scent of lemon furniture polish and old comfort. Evelyn greeted him with a soft smile and a longer-than-usual hug. Richard grunted his hello. Samantha, already seated at the table, looked up from her phone and beamed. There he is, she said, the genius. Nathan offered a stiff smile. The table was set for 4. Evelyn had pulled out the good china. There were candles, a roast in the oven, too formal. His stomach tightened. Dinner began with small talk. Samantha shared stories from a recent leadership seminar. Evelyn asked if Nathan had tried oat milk yet. Richard commented on interest rates. Everything was normal, too normal. Nathan sipped his water, barely touched the green beans. Then halfway through the meal, Richard set down his fork and cleared his throat. We've been thinking, he said. Nathan froze. Richard looked directly at him. It's time you consider stepping aside. The room contracted. Nathan blinked. What? For the good of the company? Richard continued. Samantha's been doing great work. She has a modern vision. The market's changing. You're great at building things, Nathan, but leadership's different. Nathan stared at his father as if he'd spoken another language. Samantha shifted in her seat but didn't speak. Evelyn dabbed her lips with a napkin. Richard pressed on. It's not a demotion. It's delegation. You can focus on the technical side. Product, engineering. Let Samantha handle strategy, growth, investors. Nathan's pulse pounded in his ears. I founded that company, he said, from nothing. Evelyn spoke gently, but not really nothing, sweetheart. Nathan turned to her, stunned. Evelyn glanced at Richard, then back. We believed in you. We gave you the capital. If you hadn't, Nathan interrupted, voice shaking, I would have found another way. Richard's jaw tightened. But you didn't. We were the first believers. We took the risk. Nathan's breath caught. The roast, the candles, the good china, it all made sense now. This wasn't dinner. It was deposition. He turned to Samantha. You knew about this. She hesitated. They brought it up. I didn't what Nathan asked. Didn't disagree, didn't stop them. I just want what's best for the company, she said. That's all I've ever wanted. No, Nathan said. What you've ever wanted is to be the star. The silence that followed was suffocating. Evelyn stood and began clearing dishes too quickly. The clatter of ceramic filled the room. Richard folded his arms. This isn't about ego. It's about scale. Samantha understands growth. Nathan rose from his seat. You think this is your company? He said slowly. That you get to pass it around like an heirloom. It is our company, Richard snapped. We financed it. You never would have gotten off the ground without us. Nathan stared at him. That money wasn't a gift. It wasn't even clean. There was no contract, no equity agreement, no nothing, just guilt and leverage. Evelyn stopped mid-wipe. Richard's voice dropped. Watch it. No, Nathan said. I'm done watching. Done waiting for validation from people who only see me as a placeholder. He left without dessert. Outside, the cold hit harder than he expected. He stood beside his car keys trembling in his hand, his vision blurred. It wasn't the suggestion that shocked him. It was the conviction behind it. They had already decided. In their eyes, he wasn't the founder. He was the bridge, the warm-up act. The boy in the garage had never become the man in the boardroom, not to them. And worst of all, they believed it was kindness, that they were doing him a favor. He drove aimlessly, past his old high school, past the bus stop where Samantha once waited with her violin case, past the building where he'd taken his first client call in a parked car, too embarrassed by the background noise of his apartment. He parked near the lake. The water was still black and unreadable. He thought of burning it all down. Then he thought of rebuilding. Then he thought of disappearing. He sat there until morning. When he returned to the office, nothing had changed. The coffee machine sputtered. Slack pings blinked. Samantha's laugh rang from a conference room. But something in him had shifted. He began making a list. Not a list of revenge, a list of realities. Who owned what, where assets were registered, which clients he had relationships with personally, who followed him, not the logo. The questions weren't, what do I do? They were, what do I take with me? What do I leave behind? And how do I survive the split? Nathan didn't fight, not outwardly. He smiled in meetings. He nodded at Samantha's slides. He clapped when the team landed a medium-sized logistics client she'd courted. But inside, something colder had taken hold. It wasn't rage, not even betrayal. It was clarity, the kind that arrives not with lightning but with the steady drip of truth. He realized they would never give it back. Not the company, not the recognition, not the space to lead. So he wouldn't ask for it. He would take what was his and leave the rest behind. The first move was quiet. He called an attorney. Not one from the firm Samantha had recommended or the consultant Evelyn had mentioned. He found his own someone small, discreet, and fiercely precise. A man named Connor Patel who operated out of a brownstone with no logo on the door. Nathan laid everything out, the check from his father, the verbal agreement, the total amount, the absence of any documented equity transfer or shareholder agreement. Connor listened, asked questions, then leaned back in his chair. No paper trail, he said. No rights. Nathan blinked. Even if they gave me the capital. Connor nodded. Legally, they're lenders, maybe, at best. But they have no ownership, not if you didn't promise it in writing. Nathan exhaled slowly. It was the first breath of freedom he'd taken in weeks. Next came the second step, preparation. Nathan registered a new LLC under a completely different name, Lunaris Systems. He chose the name for its quiet symbolism, the hidden moon visible only to those who knew where to look. He leased a small office in a tech co-op on the other side of the city. No signage, just an access card and a coffee machine that worked half the time. Then he began duplicating only what was his. The core infrastructure code written before Samantha joined, before even the first full-time employee. patents he'd filed under his name, the modular framework that had attracted their earliest enterprise clients. Everything with his signature. Everything he could prove was born of him. He encrypted systems, backed up archives, exported models and architecture documents onto private cloud servers only he could access. Nothing stolen, nothing illegal, just retrieved, reclaimed. The hardest part wasn't the data. It was the people. Nathan had never been charismatic like Samantha. He didn't host Friday games or send cheerful Slack emojis, but he'd been honest. He'd paid bonuses early, shielded the team from investor drama, and answered every midnight deployment call personally. So one by one in quiet coffee shops and walking meetings he reached out. He didn't beg, he didn't pitch. He told the truth. He showed them the shift in structure, the erosion of focus, the reshaping of culture in the name of Polish. He said, "I'm building something new. It won't be bigger, but it will be ours." Some hesitated. Some asked if he was sure, some cried, but most said yes. Then came the clients. Nathan didn't approach the big names first. He started with those who had worked with him directly, who remembered when he showed up to install early builds himself. He shared what he could, quietly, respectfully. No slander, just reality. Struct was changing. The roadmap was no longer his. He respected their choices either way. He gave them a timeline, options, and a transition plan. Some said they'd think about it. Some didn't reply. But the ones that mattered most, the ones that had taken a chance on him in the beginning, they followed. It took 4 months. By the time Samantha rolled out the new rebrand campaign, complete with glossy videos and a new tagline, Nathan had already transferred 80% of the intellectual assets he legally owned. By the time Richard asked for a board meeting to discuss the next growth phase, half the senior engineering team had submitted quiet resignations. And by the time Evelyn called to ask why are so many clients pausing contracts, it was done. Nathan had already moved. Not with malice, but with precision. He left his key on his old desk. No email blast, no dramatic speech, just a message in the system: Struct is in good hands. But I have to build again from my hands, my heart, and my own name. If you believe in the work, you know where to find me. Nathan. He walked out into the morning light. There was no applause, no cameras, no reckoning. But as he stepped into the sun outside Lunaris's small, imperfect office, something in his chest finally settled. He hadn't burned it down. He had simply walked away from the house he was never meant to live in, to build a home of his own. The conference room buzzed with anticipation. Samantha stood at the front, poised in a tailored blazer, her slides glowing behind her. "Vision 2030, read the header. Staff lined the glass walls, coffee in hand. Notebooks open. The new hires looked eager. The veterans looked confused. Nathan sat near the back. He hadn't said much in weeks, just nods, just presence. He wasn't here for the presentation. He was here for the exit. Samantha began with flourish. Growth metrics, market expansion, new verticals. "We're entering a bold chapter," she declared, gesturing toward the screen. "One that builds on the foundation we've set, but also reimagines who we are." Nathan studied her. She was good, confident, sharp, practiced. But it wasn't hers. Not really. When she clicked to the next slide, one titled Executive Realignment, he stood up. No one noticed at first, then his voice filled the room. "I have something to say." Heads turned. Samantha froze. Nathan walked calmly to the front. She stepped aside, unsure whether to stop him or not. He faced the team. People he'd hired, mentored, pulled through midnight bugs and unpaid betas. He didn't raise his voice. "I'm resigning," he said. A hush fell. "I've given everything to this company. Every line of code, every sleepless night, every hard decision. And I'm proud of what we've built. He glanced briefly at Samantha. But it's no longer mine. He pulled a small folder from his jacket, laid it on the table. This is a legal notice of my formal resignation and full separation from Struct. Gasps, a shuffle of chairs, whispers rippled. But I'm not leaving the work, Nathan continued. I'm taking it somewhere new, a place where the values we started with still matter. He paused. The architecture, the IP, the core platform, those belong to me. Legally, creatively, structurally. They were never owned by this entity, and they're going with me. Chaos. Richard stood in the back, red-faced. What the hell is this? Nathan didn't flinch. It's legal. I've had it verified. You never owned shares. You made a loan with no terms. You ungrateful. No. Nathan said, voice rising slightly. What's ungrateful is trying to hand over my life's work like it was yours to give. Samantha stepped forward, pale. You can't just take everything I'm not, Nathan said. Just what I built, what I protected, what I never sold. Silence. He looked around. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You felt the shift, the drift away from product, from people, from purpose. Eyes darted. I'm building something new. I'm not here to recruit. You don't owe me loyalty. But if you believed in the beginning, if you still believe in what we were, you know where to find me. He turned to leave. No drama. Just a man walking away from something that was no longer his. Outside, the air was cold. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just breathed. Behind him, the building stood still, the one he once thought would define his legacy. Now it was just a shell. He had no guarantees, no funding, no promises, but he had a name. He had his code, and he had one thing no one else in that room ever truly understood. He had started once before, and he could start again. It didn't happen all at once. Companies rarely collapse in a single day. It's more like watching a slow leak in a tire pressure fading with each mile until the whole vehicle grinds to a halt. 3 weeks after Nathan's departure, the first major client pulled out. No drama, no public statement, just an email stating that their roadmap no longer aligned with Struct's direction. A courtesy, not a conversation. By week 6, 3 more followed. Then came the resignations. Senior engineer, lead UX, 2 infrastructure architects. A quiet exodus, no accusations, just a shared silence that said, "This isn't what we built." Samantha tried to hold it together. She scheduled morale meetings, brought in a consultant, rebranded again. Something involving triangles and new colors. But you can't rebrand trust. You can't restructure soul. By month 3, cash flow tightened. Vendors weren't paid on time. Salaries delayed. Samantha made impassioned speeches about resilience, about weathering storms. But the storm wasn't the problem. The problem was emptiness at the core. Richard was the first to shift blame. You overpromised, he said. You weren't ready to lead. You should have listened to me about tightening the burn rate. Samantha fired back. You're the one who pushed me into this. You practically forced Nathan out. Evelyn tried to mediate. Please, both of you, this isn't helping. But the cracks widened. Richard accused Evelyn of coddling the children. Evelyn accused Richard of trying to run everything like a factory line. Neither of them called Nathan. Not once. Meanwhile, Nathan watched from afar. He didn't gloat, didn't post cryptic tweets or make veiled comments. When a former colleague asked if he felt vindicated, he simply said, "That's not the point." He had no appetite for revenge, only grief. Not for them, not even for the company, but for the version of himself who once believed love and merit lived in the same house. Lunaris grew steadily, not explosively. Nathan kept the team small, the vision clear. They didn't chase funding. They chased focus, and slowly, deliberately, the right clients came back. But something inside Nathan remained untouched. Even in wins, there was a hollowness. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself. Until one rainy afternoon, an envelope arrived at the office. Inside was a handwritten note. No return address, no signature, just a name at the bottom. Leah Tran. She'd been a junior analyst at Struct. Quiet, meticulous, the kind of person most leaders overlook. But Nathan had once stayed late helping her debug a data set. He hadn't thought about it since. Her letter read, "I've moved on to a new company. But I wanted to thank you. Not for the job, not even the mentorship, but for reminding me that we are more than roles and metrics. You taught me that it's okay to walk away when something no longer reflects who we are. That dignity isn't in staying. It's in remembering who we were before we were told to become someone else." Nathan read it twice, then again. And finally, he let himself cry. Not out of sadness, but release. The kind that falls like rain, soft, cleansing, real. Nathan had always believed in writing things down, not for clarity, but for survival. His journal was a sacred place, messy, honest, private. After the split, after the fall of Struct, after Lunaris began to steady, he found himself writing letters he would never send. The first was to Richard. It started with rage. Raw, unfiltered sentences, accusations. "How dare you treat me like an employee in my own creation? You taught me to earn everything, then punished me when I did. You saw Samantha's polish and forgot my persistence." Then came a strange tenderness. "I know you were scared. Of irrelevance. Of becoming the father of someone more driven than yourself. You didn't know how to be proud without control." He never printed it, just saved it to a folder titled Unspoken. The second was for Evelyn. "Dear Mom, I wish you had spoken more. I wish you had stood up for me once, just once, but I know you were caught in a current you never learned how to swim against. I remember the quiet things, your tea on my desk during finals, the cardigan you folded and left on my chair. You never chose sides. That was your peace and your failure." He wrote it in the softest ink, folded it carefully, then put it in a drawer beneath old cables and warranty slips. The third was the hardest, Samantha. "To the golden sister, we could have been unstoppable. You had the charm, I had the fire. But you wanted a throne, not a partnership. I'm not angry anymore, not really, just sad. That you never knew how much I wanted you to stand beside me, not above me." He didn't even finish it. Just closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Then Evelyn collapsed. A minor stroke, not fatal, but enough to rattle the fragile silence between them. Nathan flew back without hesitation. He walked into the sterile hallway of St. Agnes Hospital and felt 12 years old again. Powerless, watching someone soft and strong fade in a bed too white for comfort. When he entered her room, Evelyn looked up with tired eyes and a trace of a smile. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come," she whispered. "I'm here," he said simply. She reached for his hand. "I never wanted winners and losers. I just wanted us to still be family." Nathan's throat tightened. "I know." They didn't say more. There was nothing new to uncover, only old things that had finally stopped hurting enough to sit beside. Later in the hallway outside the room, he saw Samantha. She looked older, or maybe just tired. "Hey," she said. "Hey." An awkward silence hung between them like fog. Not icy, not warm, just there. "You've done well," she said. "So have you," he replied, though it wasn't entirely true. She nodded, looked away. "I didn't come here to talk about the company." "Me neither." Another pause. "Mom looks better today," she said. "She does." They both stared at the vending machine for a while. Then Samantha said, "I still have your old hoodie, the one from college. I stole it, remember to keep it, he said. It's yours now. That was all. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't war either. Just two people standing on the same floor, no longer trying to win. Lunaris didn't explode. It didn't make headlines or win unicorn status. And that was fine with Nathan. The company was healthy, profitable, quiet. It grew with care like a garden tended by someone who knew the cost of overwatering. Nathan made it clear from the beginning, no rapid scaling, no growth at all costs. Culture came first, dignity over domination. The office had no hierarchy wall. He sat with the developers. They had a flexible remote policy. Half the team had kids. One had chronic migraines. Another took Wednesdays off to care for a grandparent. Nobody needed to apologize for being human. Every quarter, instead of flashy performance reviews, they held listening days, anonymous notes. Honest dialogue. What's working? What's broken? What's missing? Some clients didn't get it. Some wanted hustle porn. Those clients didn't stay. Nathan didn't mind. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he taught part-time at a nearby community college. Introduction to Systems Design. The class was small, the building old. The projector flickered every 15 minutes. He loved it. These weren't the elite. These were first-gen students, working part-time. Some were single parents, some had scars visible and not. They asked real questions. Not how do I get rich, but how do I not lose myself in the process? He told them the truth. And they listened. One student stayed after every class, Jenna, a quiet woman in her 30s, returning to school after a decade in retail. One day she said, I used to think ambition meant becoming someone else. Now I think it means becoming more of myself. Nathan smiled. That's the only kind that lasts. One Saturday, while grocery shopping, Nathan ran into Aaron, an old friend from his university days. They drifted apart after graduation. Different cities, different lives. Aaron worked in nonprofit now, leaner, gentler, eyes that had seen real things. They had coffee, then dinner, then more. There was no grand romance, no whirlwind, just shared books, long walks, and the kind of laughter that doesn't echo but warms. Aaron never asked about Struct, never tried to fix Nathan, just saw him. And slowly Nathan let himself be seen. No armor, no pitch deck, just him, a company of one, willing finally to be part of something again. The lecture hall was half full, early morning light filtering through high windows. Nathan stood at the front, not behind a podium, but beside a small whiteboard that still had faint traces of yesterday's equations. The class was titled Entrepreneurship and Identity. It wasn't about funding rounds or pitch decks. It was about why people build and what building does to people in return. Today was the final lecture. He told them a story. Not the cleaned-up version, not the highlight reel. He told them about starting with nothing but a laptop in a garage, about rejection, about a reluctant loan with strings tied to pride, about growing something real and then watching it get taken apart, not by strangers, but by love that turned into ambition. He told them about silence, about walking away, about rebuilding without the applause. And at the end, he said, I used to think I built a company, but really I built a mirror, something that showed me who I was and who I refused to become. I didn't build a brand, I rebuilt myself. The room was still. Then came the applause, not thunderous but respectful, the kind that holds space. That evening, Nathan returned to his modest apartment by the lake. The windows faced west, catching the golden spill of sunset. He checked his email out of habit. One new message. From Samantha Cole, subject none. I'm sorry, and thank you, for not burning it all down when you could have. You were always better than me in the ways that count. He read it once, then closed his laptop. No reply. Not because he hadn't forgiven, but because forgiveness had already happened in his choices, in his peace. He stepped out onto the small balcony. The lake stretched wide, still and silver. A few ducks glided across the surface. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. A dog barked once. Nathan leaned on the railing. No audience, no validation needed. Just air and breath and the quiet understanding that he had survived his becoming. And this stillness was success. Not the kind on magazine covers, the kind you carry alone without needing to be seen, the kind that stays.